Hi, everybody. So we're back with part 2 of the Count Saint Germain. I'm going to give everybody just a little bit of time to file in, get settled. And if you thought that this one was going to be any less weird than last week, no, it's going to be more Swiss cheesy, rabbit holey. We're going to go all over the place with this one, but this one's going to be a lot of fun. Um, let me know when you're here. Say hello, and if you're new to the crypt, let us know where you're from. We always like to have new victims here in the crypt. Hi, Stephen. How are you? And Stephen says meow. Hi, Liz, and Liz says hey, loves. So we're excited to do this one. And Calvin's here. He says hi, odd mother. Well, hello, Calvin. It's good to have you here. Kisa is here. Says hi, fam. So we are so glad everybody's here. Again, this one is going to be absolutely crazy. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hi, Mikey. Mikey says, hey, guys. So Mikey is in the house. Yay. And then Cosmo. Hi, Cosmo. He says, hi, guys. Cosmo is back. So we're really glad to have you here, Cosmo. And guys, if you could please share to people that you think might enjoy this, that like creepy history, or just to have a good time. And, you know, sharing is caring. So we do like to determine who sees this, not Facebook. So just a little bit about what we're going to go over tonight before we start our house cleaning. Like I said, for the ones that are just joining us, we covered the Count Saint Germain, part 1 last week. And we kind of gave a little bit of historical reference when he kind of came into the historical records, and when we have actual documentation of him interacting in different royal courts and things like that. The stories we're going to get into here tonight, they may or may not hold water, but that's not the point. The point of stories like this, or even though some may be more in historical references, does not make the ones that are a little bit more fantastical any less important. The stories need to be told. Your mileage may vary, and like I said, they're fun, and it's part of the Count Saint Germain mythos. So, in order to cover it in a decent deep dive, we're going to go down even some of these more fantastical stories because they do tie into, like I said, the whole mythos of Count Saint Germain. So let's go ahead and get some house cleaning done. So like I always remind you guys, Facebook is getting more aggressive. It seems like every week, you know, trying to monitor and micromanage everybody's behavior, and especially if you have pages that have a healthy organic reach and following, that really messes with their algorithms because they would rather that you pay to be seen, and they can give you the views. So let's make them mad. Let's go ahead and determine our fate and who sees this, not Zuckerberg. Now, let's see, like and share, please. You can go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. And also, we are live right now on the website in the members area. This is something that we're really trying to start for because that's what a lot of media outlets are doing as far as like what we do is things are just getting so silly that everybody's kind of trying to make that slow jump to website only. So that's what we're working on. So we have an uncensored chat over there. Please feel free to go over there and watch over there and talk to your friends as well. Dustin is here and he says, hello, how are you doing today? Well, we are very, very well and hope you had a great week as well. Let's see. If you have a business group or product and are looking to advertise, PBDC TV now has limited sponsorship spaces available. You can reach us here through Facebook or through our website for more information. Also, don't forget about Eating Sundays. That's kind of our hodgepodge of horror. Pretty much anything goes on Sundays. And we're going to be trying something new, I do believe, this Sunday. Kind of going old school, putting a new face on some old school action. So we'll see if it drops this Sunday. If not, it'll be the following Sunday. And then Ange is here. She says, hey, Odd Mother. Well, hi, Ange. Glad to have you here. Let's go ahead and get the legal stuff out of the way. Hi, Mark. Mark is here. He says, evening. So we're glad to have Mark here. We have discussed this. He's a friend of mine. We go way, way back, almost 150 years ago. So he's one of my buddies I talk to about a lot of creepy history and stuff. And then Beth is here. She says, hello, Odd Mother. Well, hello, Beth. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to get some of the legal mumbo jumbo out of the way. So if we could go ahead and just run that first legal clip. My streams are for educational purposes. Pursuant to Section 17 U.S.C. Section 107 U.S. Code, unanointed Title 17, copyrights, Section 107, limitations on exclusive rights, fair use. Notwithstanding the provisions of Section 106 and 106A, the fair use of copyrighted work, including such use by reproduction in copies or phonorecords or by any other means specified by that section for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, educational, scholarships, or research, is not an infringement of copyright. So just to get that out of the way. All right, so let's see what is, do we want to take a peep at the comments real quick before we get started? Because I'm going to have to paraphrase a lot of this stuff because we have a ton of stuff here. So let's see, we have Nadine. Hello, Nadine. So she says she missed part 1. Well, I'm about to do a quick recap, Nadine, and then you are always welcome to head on over to our website or to our YouTube channel and take a look at the past streams that we've done. And then Lucas is here. He says, oi. Well, oi, Lucas. Good to have you here. All right, so to do a little bit of a recap. So last week we were talking about really getting into kind of more of the scholarly, like historical references for the enigmatic figure of Count Saint Germain. Now, we can't really start at the beginning and we can't really start at the end. What we did is we started in the middle where most scholars usually start. This was a time frame in between about 1710 and 1785. We talked about, just was he a charlatan? Was he a genius? Or was he something completely different and a whole lot more? Count Saint Germain, he spoke many languages fluently. And when I say fluently, I mean fluently, except for his French, which had a little bit of Piedmontese to it. These languages included French, German, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, English, and was further familiar with Chinese, Latin, Arabic, even ancient Greek and Sanskrit. Now, his accomplishments, he was a master at all arts, including like composing, music, the violin. Some say he may have been the second identity of Giovanni. He was an alchemist, a master alchemist. He was a chemist, a doctor, a healer, someone that was very proficient in dyes, and in makeup. He was very, very popular with the ladies of the royal court. He was very good friends with the French king, Louis XV. And let's see, he's been linked to several secret societies, including, which we're going to go into a lot of these. We're going to kind of go in a whole bunch of different directions, so try to keep up, which include the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Society of the Asiatic Brothers, the Knights of Light. Some say the Illuminati, but there's not really a whole lot of documentation there, and the Order of the Templars, to name just a few. Now, again, recapping, the parish records in the Catholic Church of Eckerford say that Saint Germain died on the 27th of February, 1784, and was buried locally. Side note, Giovanni died in 1782. So the time frames are pretty close. And much like the Somerton Man, and if you're not familiar with the Somerton Man, look it up. It's a very interesting mystery. What he left behind was rather curious. Now, Jean Overton Fuller found, she was, I believe, a writer, during her research, that the Count's estate upon his death was a packet of paid receipts and bills, 82 rick halters and 82 rick halters and 13 shillings, so basically cash, 29 various groups of items of clothing, 14 linen shirts, 8 other groups of linen items. No diamonds, jewels, gold, or any other riches were listed, nor were kept cultural items from his travels or personal items such as the violin or any notes or correspondences. So basically, none of his alchemist stuff was there either. And as we had discussed last week, he was habitually putting up labs anywhere he went. So none of that was there. Now, if this is true, and assuming that Saint Germain was about 45 to 50 years old in 1701, when he was notated in memoirs and documentation, that would make him at the time of his death somewhere around 100 to 130 years old when he died. That is assuming that he did die in Eckerford. So just a reminder for anybody that may have either missed last week or we covered it when I was talking about the Black Death. They didn't have history books back then. Most of our history that we know about, like kind of like daily life, so to speak, of certain historical figureheads and things like that, they were kept in either personal memoirs or diaries or journals or family records, correspondences, letters, things like that. And now a lot of this information that we went over do come from those documentations. So we know for a fact, historically, that Saint Germain did live. He was highly involved with a lot of the royal courts, things like that. And he always seemed to be in the right place at the right time whenever there was some sort of, I don't want to say turmoil, but I guess turmoil, some sort of political change, something along those lines. And I think Kisa said it last week. He was almost, and it's really hot in here, a harbinger of certain things to come. Now, people do make reference that he was there to try to bring in a peaceful solution to something that was going to happen. There's also references to him actually making like prophecies to things as if he knew certain things were going to happen way before they happened. So we're going to get into that too. So for any ordinary mortal, that would have been the end of the story as far as him passing away in Eckerford, but not for Count Saint Germain. He would continue to be seen throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century. Oops, hold on. My computer's acting goofy. Let's see. So where were we? All right. So official records of Freemasonry show that they chose Saint Germain as their representative for a convention in 1785, which is the year after he is notated to have passed away in Eccleford, which is actually an offshoot of Hamburg, Germany now. Count Saint Germain appears at the Masonic Convention in Paris. He is listed on the register by Dr. E. Eckerd, and N. Deschamps also recorded Saint Germain's appearance at the convention and firmly states that he is one of the Templars. And we're going to circle back around to that a little bit later. According to the Masonic archives, the guests included the famous magician and mystic and alchemist Count, and I'm going to butcher these names, Cagliostro, the philosopher Louis Claude de Saint Martin, the renowned physician and hypnosis Franz Mesmer, and the Count de Saint Germain, who is also recorded as having addressed the meeting. Now, Rosicrucianism, kind of take it aside step, is a spiritual and cultural movement that arose in Europe in the early 17th century after the publication of several texts that purported to announce the existence of a hereunto unknown esoteric order of the world and made seeking its knowledge attractive to many. Now, I am not a Mason. I am not a Rosicrucian. But from my research, and if there's a Mason here, please let me know if I'm wrong. But from my research, at one time, the Rosicrucians were kind of like an inner order of the Masons, somewhat like we know as the Shriners now, as far as being kind of an inner group offshoot, so to speak. That was kind of the way the Rosicrucians were. Now, the mysterious doctrine of the order is built on esoteric truths of the ancient past, which, concealed from the average man, provide insight to nature, the physical universe, and the spiritual realm. So we're getting into a lot of mysticism. There's a lot of mysticism that surrounds Count Saint Germain. The manifestos do not elaborate extensively on the matter, but clearly combine references to Kabbalah, Hermeticism, alchemy, and Christian mysticism. The Rosicrucian Manifesto heralds a universal reformation of mankind through a science allegedly kept secret for decades until the time arises that the intellectual climate might receive it. So keep that in mind as well. Controversies arose on whether they were a hoax, or whether the Order of the Rosy Cross, which is also what the Rosicrucians are known as, existed as described in its manifesto, and whether the whole thing was a metaphor disguising a movement that really existed, but in a different form. Any example of the Rosy Cross symbol predating the early Rosicrucian Manifesto is that shown on the central panel of the Harborville triptych, which is a Byzantine and comes from 10th century or 11th century. So even though the Rosicrucians are said to have kind of come into people knowing about them in the 17th century, there's a lot of people that say that they go back to the 10th or 11th century or even further back. The symbol is a Calvary cross with a rose in its center, which is identical to what the Masonic and Rosicrucian scholar Manly Palmer Hall claimed to be the original symbol of the Rosicrucians. Now, going back to Count Saint Germain, there is documentation that in 1786, he was also noted as having a meeting with the Empress of Russia. Then he disappears for a while, and then in 1788, prophetic verses reach the French royalty. And we touched on this last week, to where he actually is documented to have visited Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. and prophesies to them that they needed to be really careful, and that the new regime, basically, the knife, or I can't remember the actual quote, would be basically their death. So, in other words, the guillotine. He was making reference to the guillotine. Now, in 1788, these prophetic verses reach French royalty, and this is what is stated: the time is fast approaching when imprudent France, surrounded by misfortune she might have spared herself, will call to mind such hell as Dante painted. This day, O Queen, is near, no more can doubt remain. A hydrid vile and cowardly, with his enormous horns, will carry off the altar, throne, and themis, or themes. In place of common sense, madness, incredible will reign, and all the lawful to the wicked. Yea, falling shall we see scepter, censer, scales, towers, and suchinons, even the white flag, henceforth, will all be fraud, murders, and violence, which we shall find instead of sweet repose. Great streams of blood are flowing in each town. Sobs only do I hear and exile see. On all sides, civil discord loudly roars, and utterly cries, "Oh, all sides, virtue flees, as from the assembled votes of death arise. Great God, who can reply to murderous judges, and on what brows august I see the sword descend? What monsters treated as the peers of heroes, oppressors, oppressed, victors, and vanquished? The storm reaches you all in turn in this common wreck. What crimes, what evils, what appalling guilt menace the subjects as the potentates, and more than one usurper triumphs in command. More than one heart misled is humbled and repents. At last, closing the abyss and born from a black tomb, there arises a young lily, more happy and more fair." Now, that was supposedly a portent that he sent to the French royalty, because when he did visit them, if he had not been friends with Prince Louis XV, he was this close to being in a lot of trouble. Marie Antoinette did not like what he had to say at all. Now, in 1788, there is also documentation that he met with Baron Linden, telling him that he was on his way out of Europe, headed for the Himalayas, and stated, "I will rest. I must rest. Exactly in 85 years will people again set eyes on me. Farewell. I love you." And it pretty much goes dark at that point. So let's see what's going on in the chats real quick. And then we're going to go on into some other things that kind of pertain to this before Count Saint Germain shows himself back on the scene again. So Maud says, "I think he died when he went back to 1985 Hexus." Well, could he have been a real Doctor Who? There are a lot of people that think he could have very well been a time traveler. And then Liz says, "If you're immortal, you have to fake a death or two to keep from being caught." This is true. And that is some of the references that a lot of the information, if you decide to go down this rabbit hole, because like I said, there are so many, and I'm just going to be touching on some of the ones. We're not even going to get into like Sir Francis Bacon and Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff. But that's a rabbit hole. Everybody else can go look down. So, and then Michael says, "You're looking positively evil, Mother Delamorte." Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you. I will spare your soul this evening. Thank you. And then Stephen P. Kitty Cat says, "I'm pretty sure he was Dick Clark, then finally had to fake his death." And that's what I was going to say. If you're doing the research on this, you will see that there seems to be lapses. Maybe not necessarily where he completely disappears, but you won't see the name for a while. Now, there are some theories on that, and we'll kind of get into those too. But if you were, in fact, a true immortal, you would have to allow for people to pass. before you showed up again. Um, and you see that like in a lot of like Anne Rice's vampire novels and things like that, that would be something that they would do from time to time. So Kisa says in Outlander, he was a wine merchant. Yes, I would imagine if he is an immortal, I'm sure he has probably dabbled in almost everything. And then Jennifer says, "Hi, Mother and everyone. Hi, Jennifer. It's great to see you. It's good to have you here." All right. So he tells in 1788, he tells Baron Lyndon that he's going to be going to the Himalayas to rest, and that no one else will see him or lay eyes on him again for 85 years. Now, in 1789, the Inquisition seized the book, The Most Holy Trin Sophia, in Rome, which was in, going to make a reference back to the meeting, the Masonic meeting in 1785, to Cagliostro's possession. So Cagliostro was basically a kind of a friend of Count Saint Germain. They did some initiations together, and this he has several memoirs and journals that a lot of this information comes from. Now you may ask, what is the Most Holy Trans Sophia? Well, Count Saint Germain wrote 2 books. The first one is called The Most Holy Trans Sophia. I am not going to try to pronounce the French version of it. It's also known as The Most Holy Threefold Wisdom. It is a French esoteric book, allegedly authored by his friend Cagliostro, as well as Count Saint Germain. So there's some debate there on this particular book on who did the majority of the writing. Now, this dated to the 18th century. The 96-page book is divided into 12 sections representing the 12 zodiac signs. The veiled content is said to refer to an allegorical initiation detailing many Kabbalic, alchemic, and Masonic mysteries. The original manuscript is at the Library of Troyes. It is richly illustrated with numerous symbolic plates. Now, like I said, some controversy persists over the authorship of the work. Ascribing authorship to the Count of Saint Germain rests on a bookseller's note passed to the front of the original manuscript that is located in Troyes, as well as Manly Palmer Hall's own statements. So we're going to get into like a whole lot of theosophist stuff, which is basically mysticism. Okay, it's basically mysticism. Well, we'll get into that. So that is one of the books. Now, indeed, Mr. Hall states that the original manuscript was very much in the possession of Cagliostro, who is alleged to be one potential author of the manuscript, but that the Inquisition had seized it when Cagliostro was arrested in Rome in 1789. Now, the second book, and we're going to take a look at these here in just a moment, is the Triangle Book of Saint Germain, or the Triangle Manuscript, which is pretty cool because the book is triangle. It's triangular. It is an untitled 18th century French text written in code and attributed to the legendary Count Saint Germain. It takes its name from its physical shape. The binding and sheets are of vellum that comprises the manuscript are in the shapes of an equilateral triangle. The text, once deciphered, details a magical operation through which a person can perform feats of magic, notably the discovery of treasure and extensions of life, or the Philosopher's Stone, as we talked about last week. The manuscript begins with a short Latin inscription, mentioned that this is a gift given by Count Saint Germain, followed by an illustration of a winged dragon. Keep that in mind as well. We're going to go down a rabbit hole with that. All the text beyond this point, including the inscription belonging to the diagrams, is in a cipher. The book describes a ritual aimed at achieving one of 3 goals: discovering the location of certain valuable objects, life extension, and the former requires performing the ritual during a full solar eclipse. The latter can be performed at any time, but it requires wearing a specific longevity amulet, which the manuscript then refers to in a diagram. The book also comes with, looks like an amulet. So it's pretty cool. Now, the two copies of the triangular manuscript exist as a Hogarth manuscripts 109, or 209, I'm sorry, and 210. Both currently reside at the Getty Research Institute collections, each with its own history. Although this text is a part of the Manley Hall collection of alchemal manuscripts, it does not contain any of the usual alchemal content. It was likely meant to stand on its own and was only combined with other manuscripts post acquisition by the Getty Research Institute. So if we could go ahead and run the first clip, this is your look at the books. So that's some of the artwork in that one. And this is the bookmaker's note that basically is being attributed to it being written by Saint Germain. And this is the Triangle book, which I think is just absolutely awesome, absolutely amazing. And take note of the dragon. We're going to be getting into that here in a moment. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then we're going to travel to the Bastille. So this will be fun. The French Revolution. And I'm going to wet my whistle with some coffee. Let's see. Ange says, anyone know about the Knights of Templar? We are going to get into the Knights of Templar. And then Maud says, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Dun, dun, dun. And Stephen P. Kitty Cat says, now sit in the comfy chair. And then Mark says, Cardinal Fang, get the comfy chair. Oh my gosh, I love some Monty Python. And then Kisa says, I wonder if he witnessed the dressing of the king. I don't know. I don't know. You know, he hung around with a lot of very beautiful men. And then Mikey says, odd mother, you're being generous tonight. Usually you consume souls. I probably do. Now, I will purchase your soul as well. Hit me up for an RC and a moon pie. Now, those are my other things that I will do. And the Kisa says, in case anyone is wondering, the dressing of the king means all the noblemen in France got to watch the king take a poo. Yes, and the royal butt wipers. I wonder if they actually did have royal butt wipers. I've heard they did. That would just be weird. And then Jennifer Cooper says, the winged dragon makes me think of Draco and Dracula. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. So that'll be fun. That's one of those rabbit holes. And then Beth says it sounds like a Wicca or a Druid people. Well, the mysticism is very similar to another group that a lot of you have heard of, and we're going to make mention of it. Again, the rabbit holes are so much that we just can't go down all of them, but I could touch on them. And then Maud says the Triangle book was in Castlevania as well. Very cool. Very, very cool. I like when they mix like documented historical things in with fantasy. I just think that's so fun. So, all right. So let's go ahead. We're going to take a trip now to the Bastille. Now, after the taking of the Bastille in the French Revolution in 1789, the Comtesse d'Admire said she had a lengthy conversation with Count Saint Germain. He allegedly told her of France's immediate future, as if he knew what was to come. Now, in 1821, she wrote, I have seen Saint Germain again. Each time, to my amazement, I saw him when the Queen Antoinette was murdered on the 18th of Brumaire, on the day following the death of Duke Edenite in January of 1815, and on the eve of the murder of the Duke de Berry. The last time she saw him was in 1820, and each time he looked to be a man no older than his mid-40s. Now, nor does it end there. Also in 1821, the noted educationalist Madame de Gellis mentioned in her memoirs a conversation she had with Saint Germain during the Viennese peace talks. And in the same year, the French ambassador, the Count de Chalon, claimed to have spoken to him in St. Mark's Square in Venice. Now, after 1821, Saint Germain may have taken on another identity. In his memoirs, Albert Vandam wrote of meeting a man who bore a striking resemblance to Count Saint Germain, but who went by the name of Major Fraser, or Major Fraser. That's kind of a tongue twister. Vandam wrote, he called himself Major Fraser, lived alone, and never alluded to his family. Moreover, he was lavish with money, though the source of his fortune remained a mystery to everyone. He possessed a marvelous knowledge of all the countries in Europe and all periods. His memory was absolutely incredible, and curiously enough, he often gave his hearers to understand that he had acquired his learning elsewhere than from books. Many is the time he has told me, with a strange smile, that he was certain he had known Nero and had spoken with Dante, and so on. Major Fraser disappeared without a trace. Now we're going to jump to the Rosicrucians again. The Rosicrucian Michael Meer, dated 1568 to 1622, described Rosicrucianism as having arisen from a primordial tradition in the following statement. Our origins are Egyptian, Bamanic, derived from the mysteries of Eleusis and Samothrace, the Magi of Persia, the Paragirians, and the Arabs, promising a spiritual transformation at a time of great turmoil. The manifesto influenced many figures to seek esoteric knowledge. In later centuries, many esoteric societies have claimed to derive from the original Rosicrucians. The largest and most influential of these societies has been the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Some of you guys may recognize that, which consisted of several well-known members of society, including the British occultist Aleister Crowley, as well as I do believe, Bram Stoker. I believe he was a Golden Dawn, at least for a little while. The noted theosophist Annie Besant wrote that she met Count Saint Germain in 1896. This was the last confirmed sighting of the mystery man, who would have been 245 years old at the time. All right, so we're going to go down another rabbit hole because it's part of the mythos and because it's fun. So, like I said, let me just reverbalize that. This was the last confirmed sighting of the mystery man, who would have been 245 years old at the time in 1896. But oddly enough, according to stories, in 1902, let me find my pointer, a mysterious man arrived in New Orleans under the name of Jacques Saint Germain. Handsome, elegant, wealthy, and entertaining, extravagant, mysterious, and a bit curious. His reputation preceded him, and he was soon the hit of New Orleans society. The electric Jacques Saint Germain is said to have taken residence at the home located at 1039 Royal Street. Saint Germain was apparently a cavalier and quite the ladies' man, frequently seen with beautiful women on his arm while strolling through the French Quarter, or clubbing in elegant locales late into the night. He delighted in throwing elaborate dinner parties for the city's societies. His parties were highly anticipated due to their lavish cuisine, fine wine, and entertainment. Most relished, however, was his own conversation. Saint Germain fascinated his guests with stories of France, Italy, Africa, and even Egypt. Visitors were delighted and amused by his eloquent grasp of the English language. They were a bit confused, however, when he spoke of events hundreds of years in the past in such precise detail as though he himself had participated. Many guests placed little value in the truth of his tales, simply embracing them for the entertainment value during their visits to his home. Now, not long after his arrival to New Orleans, Saint Germain claimed he was a direct descendant of the Comte de Saint Germain, or Count Saint Germain, a close friend and servant to King Louis XV in the 18th century. His claim aroused skepticism, but his resemblance to the Comte was uncanny. Eagle-eyed guests noted that portraits never depicted the Comte as any older than 40, the same age that Jacques Saint Germain had appeared since he arrived in New Orleans. Rumors started to spread in jest that Saint Germain may in fact be the very celebrated Count Saint Germain himself, somehow rendered immortal and ageless. Jacques seemed to enjoy the mystery he had created around his persona and neither confirmed nor denied it. Although Saint Germain's catered parties were highly celebrated, the host was said to have relished his guests' satisfaction of the offered feast without partaking of them himself, often standing apart from the table, drinking from a lavish chalice, presumably filled with wine. During the dinner, he offered fantastical recollections of his adventures for his guests' enjoyment. The very strange habit of not partaking in meals at his own soirees, coupled with his remarkable resemblance to the Count Saint Germain, these rumors, however, took a sinister turn several months later. After Saint Germain's arrival to New Orleans, when the police were called to Saint Germain's home to investigate the circumstances leading to a woman who had seemingly fallen from his gallery, a full story above. His guest, a woman who was rumored to have been a prostitute, had in fact leapt from his balcony rather than fallen. As bystanders had originally surmised, while she survived the fall, she was terrified. People on the street surrounded her and tended to her needs while help was on its way. Hysterical, the woman ranted that she had jumped to escape Saint Germain, who had bitten her on the neck. She screamed and sobbed out her story, claiming she was only able to escape when her assailant was briefly distracted by a rather loud knocking on the door. The woman was taken to the hospital as soon as possible, and the police suspected that she had become delusional, told the very well-known, affluent, and respected Saint Germain not to bother coming in for questioning at this late hour, but rather to please visit the station in the morning to go over the accounts of the evening. The police were confident that there was a reasonable explanation for what transpired. The next morning, however, Saint Germain never appeared at the police station. In fact, to everyone's chagrin, he had completely vanished overnight, leaving the majority of his belongings behind. Legend suggests that upon breaking into his house, the police were cautious and in great anticipation of what they might encounter. On the second floor of the house, they discovered a series of opened but corked wine bottles. Upon closer investigation, they discovered the large collection of bottles were filled with a terrifying mixture of wine along with large quantities of human blood. Jacques Saint Germain was never seen again. He disappeared just as mysteriously as he had arrived. Now you can find that reference. This story is referred to as, of course, the Vampire of New Orleans. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. All right. And then Mark says, I do believe that Saint Germain thing was a society. That's what I'm thinking. We're going to get into that a little bit too, Mark. It may have been the hoax or troll of a lifetime, or maybe there's a purpose behind it. But he says, I believe there was a Saint Germain and that he had quite a few followers. Those followers became Saint Germain through the decades. They went around visiting the aristocracy and nobles of Europe. Just think Dread Pirate, Dread Pirate Robert. You know, or it could be that is the face of a particular society. Is my thought as well. And then Maud says Crowley had some funny interactions with the Golden Dawn after he left, like absolutely gut splitting funny interactions with them. Should I encourage him? But yeah, because there are some references um, within some of the manuscripts or manifestos of the Rosicrucians that we're going to get into in just in a moment that does kind of reference to that, finding someone to take your place. So Beth says, that is why I believe he was a vampire. There are a number of people that you know, like I said, there's so many different uh, rabbit holes, you know, different avenues that you can take on this. You know, we're going to get into some of his. Um, a lot of people believe, even to this day, especially with like the Theosophists and things like that he was like an ascended master. Whether that would be in a spiritual form to where you are reincarnated, but you keep your memories because of, you know, whatever, whether it's through things that he did with his alchemic work or whatever, or if he actually resides in the same body and either ages very, very slowly or has transmutated into in a way to basically live forever and has ascended into almost like this. Think of like the monks, like the Tibetan monks and things like that, where they try to ascend to a higher um, version of themselves, I guess, or a higher realm. But he is referred to as the ascended master as well in some circles. Okay, so I'm going to go now into, we're going to go into the Knights Templar a little bit and go back to that reference in the Triangle Book of the Dragon. Now, there is a website. This website has been, it's owned by a lady by the name of Jessie Desmond. And she has had this website, from my understanding, since the 1990s. It's called Finding Count Saint Germain. And I believe she's in the process of writing some books, but she has got every type of rabbit hole you can think of when it comes to the Count Saint Germain. And I'm telling you, you can go down some rabbit holes with this subject. And so I'm going to kind of get into some of the things that she's talking about as far as the Knights Templar. Now, this is based on just kind of, because when you start getting really far into history, you just have to make some kind of logical assumptions and things like that. And it's just it's a fun version. So we're going to get into the Knights Templar. Now, they started during the Crusades, which was somewhere around the 12th century. They were warrior monks who claimed to protect travelers going to and from Jerusalem and surrounding areas. They can even be attributed with the first credit cards. But they amassed a very, very large bit of wealth. To the point, I think most everybody knows the story behind the Templars, to the point that they really became a threat. And in the beginning of the 14th century, somewhere around 1307, the Knights Templar were spurned by the church, and they were persecuted as being witches, basically. They were all burned at the stake, hence Friday the 13th. Now, as knights were being burned at the stake and killed in a variety of ways and tortured to find their money and their treasures, during those 2 centuries that the Knights Templar were active, kind of going back, they were known to have acquired an exorbitant amount of wealth, a massive fleet of ships, and some legendary items like the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. Now, during the start of the medieval Inquisition that killed so many of the knights, the Grand Master de Molay had the Templars pack up the fleet of ships and sent out knights uh, with the Templars' treasures. They went in all directions. The fleets were never found, and most of the treasures were never recovered. Since the Templars went in all directions in order to hide their possessions and to escape persecution, it is incredibly probable that some of them ended up in Eastern Europe. If we could go ahead and run the next clip, please. Just a little slideshow for you. These are some of the symbols that were known to be used by the Knights Templar. All right. In fact, it doesn't take a genius to look at the Order of the Dragon to realize this. The Order of the Dragon was started in the early 15th century, somewhere around 1408. Because remember, it's always the years before the century. So I'm 147 years old, which means that I am within my 146th year. So that's how they kept up with that. So in 1408, it was a highly selective order that led many campaigns to keep the Ottomans out of Europe. If we can go ahead and run clip 3. So you'll see some similarities here. That was Templar. That's Order of the Dragon. More dragons. More references to Templars. All right. All right, so Vlad Dracula was inducted into the order because of his father, Vlad II Dracul, who was in the order. By the age of 13, for those of you that don't know all of the backstory with Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracul had completed his early knighthood training by the age of 13. Now, Vlad Dracul and his younger brother, Radu, were given to the Sultan by his father as hostages so that the Ottomans wouldn't invade. So basically, it was kind of like a trade-off. Now, there are some suggestions that both Vlad Tepes as well as Radu were probably molested, raped, and abused with the Ottomans. However, they were given a Muslim education. They were given instruction in the Quran, the principles of Islamic theory, Islamic law, with an emphasis on statecraft, military science instead of religion. The liberal arts, physical exercise, manual training, vocational training were also important constructs of a well-rounded palace education. Learning Turkish, Arabic, and Persian languages were very typical, as well as familiarizing oneself with the literature, history, and mathematics. The physical exercise was a combination of gymnastics, Olympic sports, and horsemanship. Now, by his late teens, Vlad Tepes, or known as Dracula, had escaped the Muslims and began his first reign out of 3 of the Wallachia and Transylvanian area. He believed in absolute justice. You're either good or you're bad. There's no gray area whatsoever. If you were bad, guess what? You usually got tossed up onto a stake. Most likely, it was used as a scare tactic to force people into following the laws of the land, and it worked. The people, however, of Wallachia and Transylvania did regard him as a national hero. He brought back the economy. He wanted to industrialize his lands, and he was excellent at keeping the Ottomans out of Europe. His lands blocked the Ottoman Empire from the rest of Europe. There were also rumors that Dracula had acquired a mysterious treasure. Now, Hungary got really upset with Vlad Tepes. because he was getting, well, supposedly there may have been some money that may have been coming from the Pope, even though he wasn't Catholic, he was Orthodox. Now, there are some statements here that propaganda flew around until Tepish was kicked off the throne and essentially put on house arrest for somewhere around 12 years. The Hungarians, however, were terrible at keeping out the Ottomans, so Europe ended up with an invasion on their hands. Um, Dracula eventually had a short third reign where he supposedly died in battle. Now, at this time, they did use some battle tactics, such as lookalikes and different things like that. If you've ever looked into kind of the mythos of Vlad Tepes, some say that it was a lookalike that got killed, not him, and a lot of different things like that. So, but as the story goes, he was beheaded. His head was put in a jar of honey, and it was taken to the Sultan. But no one has ever found the body of Dracula. In his grave, there were just some animal bones. Whatever the case may be, everyone seems to agree that on December of 1476 to January of 1477, he was somewhere between there. He was severely injured from war, and the people were informed that he was dead. Though the location of where he died is still a mystery. And a lot of people will say that, his body was hid so that, there wouldn't be more desecration of his body. By enemies and things like that. So that is connection there. There are some that believe that even Saint Germain and Tepish could have been the same person. But wait, I've never actually given you a description of his appearance. Now, his personal appearance, the Count Saint Germain, has been described as of medium height, well proportioned in body, and of regular and pleasing features. His complexion was somewhat swarthy, and his hair dark. Though often powdered, he dressed simply, usually in black, but his clothes were well fitted and of best quality. Now, I had to look up swarthy. I wasn't really sure. That means he was dark complected. So if you like tall, dark, and handsome, that's what he was. Usually swarthy complexions are a reference to someone with olive skin, and also describe the skin as being weather beaten or darkened by the sun. So he was not the more Anglo looking that you see in a lot of his depictions. Yes, you had your powdered wigs and things like that, but from a lot of different descriptions, he is of olive skin, dark eyes, and dark hair. Now, there is another rabbit hole that states that some believe him to be, and there are two different names, okay? So there's one that starts with an A, and then this one. Cataphilus, Catraphilus, who is known as the legendary Wandering Jew. Now, this particular legend, he was a Roman guard of the high priest Caliphas in Jerusalem, and he slapped and mocked Jesus of Nazareth on the way to his crucifixion in Gothica on Good Friday. The soldier was therefore cursed to never die and to walk the earth till the end of days and Jesus' second coming. So there are a lot of people that believe that he may, in fact, be the Wandering Jew. Now, there are also documentations in memoirs as well as family journals and things like that of the Count making references to times before. One of them was between 1600 and 530 BC. The Count claims to have received the staff of Moses from one of Moses' great-grandsons during the time of Cyrus. Location, Babylon. In 364 to 375 BC, lived as a missionary under the rule of Emperor Valentinian I. As a missionary during this time, he traveled to Cornwall, England. From 1307 to 1327, had rooms at the Tower of London under King Edward II's rule. also knew Raymond Lull, and I'm not sure who Raymond Lull is. You can look that up. Between 1510 and 1540, Count Saint Germain claims to have spent time studying speculative chemistry with Francis I of France at some point during these years. And between 1545 and 1563, sometime during this time frame, Count Saint Germain related to Casanova that he dined in Trento with the fathers of the Council of Trent. Now, in 1580, claimed to know Monsieur, and I'm going to really butcher these names, Monsieur de Montaigue, who died in 1592, and even produced a written dedication from Montaigue to himself as Count Saint Germain when Madame Pompadour asked. Now, believed that between 1614 and 1617, kind of getting into the Rosicrucian thing again, there are 3 anonymous manifestos were published first in German and then later through Europe. These were the Fama Fraternalists, basically the fame of the Brotherhood, and the Confessions of the Brotherhood, and the Seminical Wedding of Christian Rosy Cross Anno of 1459. Now, I'm going to go into some references on this, but let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then Maud says Dracula died. Texas would know. Look, I was Dracula, just saying. And then Beth said he might have died where people made out like as if he was still alive. It's possible. Again, it could have just been like a really big hoax. Now there's references into what I'm about to get into that kind of talks about how the Rosicrucians were set up and some of the things that they were asked to do upon their deaths. So let's see. Nadine says there is a site you can buy Dracula dirt. It's like dirt from his dirt floors. Be very careful now. I have heard before, you know how you're not supposed to take volcanic rock from a volcano? You're not supposed to take dirt from Transylvania or Romania. Bad juju will happen. That's what I've heard. And then let's see. Ma says, you've piqued my interest, Nadine, as I need fresh Romanian soil to live. At your own risk, people, at your own risk. And then Ma says, me, I would totally fall for that gimmick. All right. So, like I said, there were some manifestos that were released, and they're saying that a lot of the Rosicrucian or the Rosy Cross go back to as early as 1378, and that there was a gentleman by the name of Christian Rosicruz, or the Rosy Cross, who basically he was into like some, like different Middle Eastern mysticisms and things like that. And he wanted to be able to spread certain knowledges he had acquired, but he was unable to do it throughout prominent European scientists and philosophers. So instead, what he wound up doing is gathering a small circle of friends, disciples, and founded the Rosicrucian order. Now, skeptics argue that the known history and longevity of Count Saint Germain could be some kind of elaborate hoax, but it would be impossible for any individual or organization, for that matter, to extend such a hoax over such a long period of time, as well as keeping it alive in so many different countries and cultures. Now, one of the things that this Christian Rosicruz put in there was basically that it would be a gathering of 8 people, and that you were to find a replacement before your death. So, what is to say that one identity, you don't take on a certain identity? Maybe out of these 8 people, you find someone take your name and to take your identity when you die. Basically to um, continue that knowledge, continue the order of the Rosicrucians, and things like that. So maybe not so much a hoax, but that might explain how they were able to do it over such a long period of time and through different countries. Now, skeptics also ask why, given that Saint Germain was supposed to have led such an extraordinary and active life, the historical records on him are so thin, other than, like I said, family memoirs, family journals, and things along those lines. Well, sorry guys, I got a hair. This may have been deliberate by Count Saint Germain's part. That's what some people think. For instance, Napoleon III was so intrigued by the stories of Saint Germain that he set up a special council to investigate him. However, the commission's findings were destroyed in a fire that consumed the Hotel de Ville in Paris in 1871, and few were willing to ascribe that disaster as coincidence. Similar obstructions to the sources of information and the mysterious destructions of discovered rare material evidence have occurred throughout the years since Saint Germain's final recorded manifestation in 1896, when, again, Beth Besant noted her meeting with him. All right, so we're going to move into 1913 to 1914. It is believed that he spent time in Madagascar. Now, he shows up, or there's some references, that he shows up in August of 1914 during World War I. 2 Bulgarian soldiers captured a Jewish-looking man in Elsac during the all-night interrogation. The prisoner of war stubbornly refused to give his name. Suddenly, in the early hours of the morning, the unidentified Frenchman got very irritable and started to rant about the futility of the war. He told his captors, "Throw down your guns. The war will end in 1918 with defeat for the German nation and her allies." One of the soldiers, an Andre Rill, laughed at the prisoner's words. He thought that the man was merely expressing the hopes of every Frenchman, but he was intrigued by the prisoner's other prophecies. Everyone will be a millionaire after the war. Where's my pointer? My computer just wants to act so crazy. All right, let's see, where were we? All right, there will be so much money in circulation, people will throw it from windows and no one will bother to pick it up. You will need to carry it around in wheelbarrows to buy a loaf, the Frenchman predicted. Was he referring to the rampant inflation of post-World War I Germany? The soldiers scoffed at the prediction. They let the prophet ramble on. He gave them more future history lessons. After the confetti money will come the Antichrist, a tyrant from the lower classes who will wear an ancient symbol. He will lead Germany into another global war in 1939, but will be defeated 6 years on after doing inhumane and unspeakable things. The Frenchman then stated to become incoherent. He started to sing, then he began to sob. Thinking he was mad, the soldiers decided to let him go, and he disappeared back into obscurity. His identity is still unknown. Now, in 1921, in New York, Paul Foster Case, founder of the Builders of the Adytum, claimed to have met the Count in his incarnation as Master R. And this is when you start getting into like the Ascended Master and the I Am philosophy, because there's almost like a cultish following of Count Saint Germain as like the ascended master. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole you can get into with that. Now, in 1925, he was seen at a Masonic convention in France. In 1926, C.W. Ledbetter claimed to have met him in Rome and gave a physical description of a man as having brown eyes, olive-colored skin, and a pointed beard, according to Ledbetter. The splendor of his presence impels men to make obedience. Ledbetter said that Saint Germain showed him a robe that had been previously owned by a Roman emperor, and that Saint Germain told him that one of his residences was a castle in Transylvania. According to Ledbetter, when performing magical rituals in this castle in Transylvania, Saint Germain wears a suit of gold chain mail, which once belonged to a Roman emperor. Over it is thrown a magnificent cloak of Tyrian purple, with on its clasp a 7-pointed star in diamond and amethyst, and sometimes he wears a glorious robe of violet. Now, in August of 1930, we have gone over. Guy Ballard met Saint Germain on Mount Shasta in California, and this is where the I am doctrine activity or whatever started. Then in 1933, a letter to the head of the Co-Masonic Society in San Jose, Costa Rica appears. And then in 1933, Vampire Jack attacked women for 2 consecutive days in New Orleans. And I am going to stop there for a moment so that we can do a station identification and a word from our sponsor.
This is Mikey from Out of the Ordinary, and you're watching PBDC TV.
Oh, hi! First thing in the morning, when I'm listening to music and getting a little bit of time for some creepy research, I'm always representing with my PBDC merch. What a better way to have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't forget to check out our other cool merch at rootsbleedred.com. That's rootsbleedred.com.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDC TV. Now back to the show.
And we're back. And like I said, I am just touching on all these different rabbit holes. So, again, in 1933, yes, look, it's Odd Mother, yay! I was showing my cheese. So in 1933, old Jack shows back up in New Orleans. Now, in 1933, on 2 different nights, police were called to Royal Street, where on each night a young woman, both suspected prostitutes, were found laying in an alley with their throats torn out. Both women had been dead only a few minutes when they were found, but no blood was found on the scene of either crime. It is interesting to note that a local resident who lived above one of the murder scenes claimed a dark figure that had been down over the one woman when she was spotted, and people began to scream for the police. The man said the dark figure had climbed over a 12-foot wall at the end of the alley and that he had no trouble getting over the 12-foot wall. It appeared to him, he said, that the dark figure he assumed to be a man had simply walked up the wall and over the other side into the yard of a large house located there. Police searched but found nothing, and these 2 murders were never solved and remain unsolved to this day. As well as in 1984, 9 people were found in and around the French Quarter of New Orleans. They all had been murdered by having their throats torn out. The paramedics responded to the scene, were struck by the fact that there was no blood at any of the scenes. They said it was like something or someone had simply sucked all the blood up. Police to this day do not have any suspect in the 1984 vampire murders, and the murders ended as quickly as they had begun. Rumors at the time said that it was a rogue vampire and that he was destroyed by the elder vampires of New Orleans because he had brought too much heat down on the vampire community of New Orleans. But in 1938 to 1972, The Grand Invasion is published by Jacques SAINT GERMAIN. He will publish a number of books up through 1972. In the late 1960s, Thomas Selman claimed a sighting of the Count at a political conference known in Berlin, you may be familiar, known as the Bilderberg Conference. Apparently in 1966, the Bilderberg Conference in Hesse, that was being held at the Nassurhof Hotel Wiesbaden in Wiesbaden, West Germany. And then January 28th of 1972, and I've skipped something. I'm going to go back to it here in just a minute because it's really interesting. January 28th of 1972, Richard Chanfrey went on French television claiming to be the Count. Now, some say that this claim was false. Now, the interesting thing about Richard, back in the 1970s, a man named Richard Chanfrey came out publicly to claim that he was the Count de Saint Germain. Chanfrey actually appeared on a handful of television programs where he appeared to turn lead into gold. Now, in 1983, news surfaced that Richard had taken his own life in St. Topaz. Nobody was ever found, only a suicide note. So if we can run clip 4. Oh, is that, I think that's, no, not that one, not that one. Oh, did I skip something? Hold on. All right, let me skip down to that. Okay, basically what this is. All right. If you go to we can go ahead and start that. If you go to it's a website, I can list it later. It's basically the memoirs of Benjamin Franklin. They make reference to a Count Saint Germain. Now, I'll get into the story in just a minute, but there is thought to be Count Saint Germain in that picture right there of the signing of um, the Constitution or the Independence. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can find the story right here, and I can tell you. Let's see. Yeah, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, this particular person was searched the faces, finding the most common men that were taught in history class. But then I noticed someone I believe to be the Count Saint Germain. If you are at all interested in what I have told you today, look it up on the painting. So that was that. The first photo, which is the largest, is the one I looked at. You can find the man to the left of Benjamin Franklin. He is seated in front of a door in an odd position. All right, so we can go ahead to the next clip then. So this right here, this is Richard Chanfrey. He is the one that stated that he was the next incarnation of Count Saint Germain, but then supposedly committed suicide. However, nobody was ever found. Nobody was ever found. Oh, we can stop for just a second. All right, so see, this is why I shouldn't do editing in the middle of the night. All right, so the one that I left out was in 1942 to 1945. Mr. E.B. met, and I got this from the Finding Count Saint Germain website as well, just because she's got just a plethora of information. But a Mr. E.B. met with a Marcus S. Garman, who was reportedly much like the mysterious Count Saint Germain at Bohemian Grove in California. Mr. E.B.'s grandson, Mr. R.W., basically had submitted a letter that was based on his grandfather's memoirs in his journal that dates it to be somewhere approximately around 1945, since there was a meeting at Bohemian Grove in regards to the Manhattan Project. There was also a meeting in September of 1942 regarding the Manhattan Project. And said, by trade, my grandfather was a writer and a storyteller, but in all his stories, he had a sense of truth. For this story, my grandfather had written in his private journal that gives a list of receipts, list of dates, people, and places and timelines, and other indications that this was more than just a story. Now, it goes on to say that my grandfather said that while at Bohemian Grove in the 1940s, he did meet a man who was oddly looked very similar to Count Saint Germain. Now, while at the Grove, it states my grandfather asked the man, whom he had called him Marcus S. Garman, which is kind of a anagram, if he would have dinner with him, to which Marcus replied kindly that he only eats alone. When my grandfather asked if he would rather have a drink, Marcus agreed, but it only be spring water, to which he added flavoring from a small glass bottle he kept in the inside pocket of his outdated but still new-looking jacket. They talked for a while about art, science, weather, politics, literature, and of my grandfather's writings. The man told my grandfather a story about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He said Marcus recounted the event as if he were actually there. He said that the men who were signed Uh, the men who were to sign the declaration were all afraid of being punished for treason. He stated that this took place at Carpenter's Hall in August of 1775. Upon hearing this from the cowardly men, the man, Marcus, said, "A stranger stood up and revolted. The gods gave America the freedom to be." This story has stuck with me since my grandfather told me this in the early 1990s. It brings me to the point that I am writing to you today. I have been reading into the Men in Black phenomenon, and I have come across an entry in one of the books by Jim Keith that mirrors the man Marcus's story. And it says that has the men that signed the Declaration of Independence in the State House in Philadelphia. They are afraid for their lives with the forfeit of their audacity. A voice rang out, and they noticed a stranger. He cried out, "God has given America to be free." Now, what I was saying earlier, in the Papers of Benjamin Franklin, which is sponsored by the American Philosophical Society and Yale University, there was a letter that was received from Count Saint Germain to Benjamin Franklin. It's in French, but basically a rough translation is Mr. Count Saint Germain, who had the honor to visit in November last month, made an insurance claim. Oh, he's writing about him. I'm sorry. Made an insurance claim in respect of a considerable estate that his family left him in New York in New England. Thanks to the fact that you told him that New York had caught up to England, he followed the advice you gave him about the insurance with the Marquis de Noailles, then ambassador of London. He sent a memorandum to beg him to get an order from the Minister of England to force Mr. Pintard, his attorney, to withdraw £60,000, which were in the hands of Sampson's father and son, testifying executioners of adoring the solicitor. The Marquis, due to diligence to the Minister of England, was unsuccessful, which makes it even more important to claim insurance in the hope that his power, or America Power, will compel Mr. Pintard to pay £60,000 under liability, or that it must be recovered under power of attorney. These said Sampson's father and son, talking to him every day as you instructed until he folds. So basically, it was a correspondence between or about the Count Saint Germain from Benjamin Franklin. So who was the Count Saint Germain? Was he a genius, a charlatan, a real-life Doctor Who, or an immortal being straight out of the supernatural? I will leave that for you to decide. But let's take a look at who else may be Count Saint Germain. Now we can run that clip. And what I put in there just because it's fun. So there's one possibility. Or another possibility. Or another possibility. All right, guys, I know that I was a little long in the tooth tonight, but there is so much with this particular topic that I only hit the high points with this just to give you kind of a good understanding of all the different rabbit holes and all the mythos related to this particular person. And you don't hear a lot about it. That is what is so odd. Like, it has made it into like Castlevania and Outlander and things like that. But you would think with all these references to so many different things that the name would be more of like a household name, and it isn't. It is very odd. And Kisa says, very interesting. Well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. We may be having a very special guest on next week, so that will be fun, and talking about some different things And we might get into the Count Saint Germain a little bit too, because I do believe that he is familiar with the lore of Count Saint Germain. Because, like I said, there were so many like rabbit holes we didn't even get into. And so we might touch on some of those or something. I'm not really sure. I want to thank all of our viewers and supporters. Without you guys, none of this is possible. The best way, the absolute best way that you can support us is by sharing our content to your groups and to your friends or anybody that you think might be interested. But if you would like to further support the artists here at PBDC TV, you can check out our coffee bar on our websites and buy us a coffee through Ko-Fi. We all appreciate that. But thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope that you enjoyed this. Again, I know it was a little long-winded, but it's really hard to do research on an enigma and get really specific. So there was a lot of study that went into this. But I really do recommend you check it out. If you found any of this interesting, go down that rabbit hole. You'll find yourself at the computer for quite a while. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Again, we're working on something special. Hopefully it will drop this Sunday on Eaton. If not, then the following Sunday. But we're gonna be doing a spin on something, making something old, something new again. Putting our own special spin on something. So it should be fun. Pleasant nightmares, everybody. Bye.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. Do not attempt to adjust your device. There is nothing wrong with it. I am here to deliver a message. Join Psycho Bunny Death Cult in our anti-censorship campaign. Free your mind. Free your head.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.